The morning mist clung to the ancient towers of Valdoria Palace like a shroud of secrets waiting to be unveiled. Queen Consort Isabella stood at the towering windows of the East Wing, her fingers tracing the cold glass as she watched the palace guards conduct their dawn patrol across the meticulously maintained grounds. The rhythmic sound of their boots on cobblestone provided a comforting backdrop to her troubled thoughts. But today, even this familiar ritual couldn't ease the growing tension that had been building within the palace walls for weeks. Isabella had never imagined that accepting the crown would bring such turmoil. When she married King Alexander 3 years ago, she believed the greatest challenge would be adapting to royal protocol and managing the endless stream of diplomatic functions. She had been naive then, thinking that love and dedication would be enough to navigate the treacherous waters of monarchy. Now, as she stood in the very chambers where queens before her had faced their own trials, she understood the weight of the crown was far heavier than the jeweled circlet that adorned her head during state ceremonies. The kingdom of Valdoria had prospered under King Alexander's rule for nearly 2 decades. His first marriage to the beloved Queen Catherine had produced Crown Prince William, now 28 and heir apparent to the throne. Catherine's tragic death in a riding accident 10 years ago had left the entire nation in mourning, and Alexander himself had retreated into a shell of grief that seemed impenetrable. It wasn't until Isabella entered his life that the king began to emerge from his self-imposed isolation, but their romance and subsequent marriage had divided public opinion sharply. Prince William had never fully accepted his stepmother, though he maintained a facade of courtesy during public appearances. Isabella understood his reluctance to embrace her presence in his father's life, but his cold indifference had evolved into something more troubling in recent months. She had noticed the way conversations ceased when she entered rooms where William was present, the meaningful glances exchanged between him and certain members of the royal guard, and most concerning of all, the increasing frequency of his private meetings with Lord Chancellor Marcus Thornfield. Lord Thornfield was a man whose family had served the crown for generations, but whose personal ambitions had always seemed to eclipse his loyalty to the throne. Isabella had sensed his disapproval from the moment she became queen consort, though he was far too politically savvy to express it openly. His influence over Prince William, however, had grown considerably, and Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that together they were orchestrating something that would fundamentally change the dynamics of the royal family. The discovery that would trigger the crisis came entirely by accident. While overseeing the renovation of the late Queen Catherine's private study, which had remained untouched since her death, Isabella's lady-in-waiting, Margaret, stumbled upon a loose floorboard beneath an antique writing desk. Hidden in the small compartment below were several leather-bound journals, their pages filled with King Alexander's distinctive handwriting from the years immediately following Catherine's death. Margaret, loyal and discreet, had brought the journals directly to Isabella without reading them herself. But as Isabella began to examine the entries, her blood ran cold. The pages revealed not just Alexander's grief, but a web of family secrets that painted the royal family's recent history in an entirely different light. The journals detailed Alexander's growing suspicions about the circumstances surrounding Catherine's death, his discovery of financial irregularities involving Lord Thornfield's management of royal funds, and most damaging of all, his documented concerns about Prince William's fitness to inherit the throne. The entries revealed that Alexander had been quietly investigating several troubling incidents involving his son, including accusations of reckless behavior that had been covered up by palace security, questionable financial dealings with foreign interests, and a pattern of decision-making that suggested William might not possess the temperament necessary for effective leadership. The king had even begun consulting with constitutional experts about the possibility of altering the line of succession, though he had never acted on these considerations. What made the situation even more explosive was Alexander's revelation that he had shared some of these concerns with Catherine before her death, and that she had been planning to have a serious conversation with William about his behavior. The final entry, dated just weeks before Isabella and Alexander's engagement, suggested that the king had decided to give his son one final chance to demonstrate maturity and responsibility before making any irreversible decisions about the succession. Isabella found herself in an impossible position. The journals contained information that could destabilize not just the royal family, but the entire kingdom. If their contents became public, the scandal would be devastating. Prince William's reputation would be destroyed, the monarchy's credibility would be severely damaged, and the political ramifications could last for generations.
Yet keeping the information secret felt like a betrayal of her duty to the crown and to the people of Valdoria.
She decided to confide in the one person she trusted completely, Lady Catherine Northworth, her closest friend and confidant since childhood. Catherine Northworth had served as Isabella's chief advisor since the marriage, helping her navigate the complex world of royal politics with wisdom and discretion. When Isabella shared the journal entries with her friend, Catherine's reaction was immediate and alarming. Catherine Northworth revealed that she had been conducting her own quiet investigation into suspicious activities within the palace, prompted by irregularities she had noticed in official communications and financial records. Her findings corroborated many of the concerns expressed in Alexander's journals, and she had additional evidence suggesting that Prince William and Lord Thornfield were planning something significant that could affect the balance of power within the royal family. The two women spent hours analyzing the situation, weighing their options and considering the potential consequences of various courses of action. They ultimately decided that King Alexander must be informed about the discovery of his journals, despite the awkward position this would place him in regarding his private thoughts about his son. They also agreed that they needed to gather more concrete evidence about Prince William's current activities before taking any decisive action. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. During a state dinner honoring visiting dignitaries from the neighboring kingdom of Astoria, Isabella noticed several unusual occurrences that seemed to confirm her worst fears. Prince William engaged in lengthy private conversations with the Astorian ambassador, conversations that appeared to exclude the official diplomatic protocols that normally govern such interactions. Lord Thornfield was observed exchanging documents with members of the visiting delegation in a manner that seemed deliberately secretive. Most concerning of all, Isabella overheard a fragment of conversation between Prince William and Captain Harrison Reed, the head of the Royal Guard, in which they discussed implementing the new security protocols and ensuring complete loyalty among all personnel. The tone and context of their discussion suggested they were planning significant changes to palace operations, changes that had not been discussed with or approved by King Alexander. Following the state dinner, Isabella and Catherine Northworth decided they could no longer delay informing the king about the situation. They requested a private audience with Alexander, using the pretext of discussing upcoming charitable events. When they met in the king's private chambers the following morning, Isabella carefully presented the journals and explained how they had been discovered. King Alexander's reaction was complex and deeply troubling. Rather than expressing surprise or concern about the discovery, he seemed resigned, as though he had been expecting this moment to arrive eventually. He confirmed that the journals were authentic, and that his concerns about Prince William had only intensified in the years since those entries were written. He revealed that he had been aware of his son's meetings with Lord Thornfield and had been conducting his own investigation into their activities. What shocked Isabella most was Alexander's admission that he had recently made a decision that would change everything. He had been in secret negotiations with constitutional experts and key members of Parliament about formally altering the succession laws to allow for the designation of a different heir to the throne. The process was complex and would require careful political maneuvering, but Alexander had become convinced that Prince William's ascension to the throne would be detrimental to the kingdom's future. The king's plan was to announce these changes during the upcoming royal anniversary celebration, a grand event that would bring together representatives from across the kingdom and international dignitaries. He intended to use the occasion to publicly address the succession issue while simultaneously revealing evidence of the financial irregularities and security concerns that had influenced his decision. However, Alexander's revelation came with an urgent warning. He had reason to believe that Prince William and Lord Thornfield had become aware of his intentions and were planning to take preemptive action to prevent any changes to the succession. Intelligence gathered by Alexander's most trusted advisors suggested that they were preparing to challenge his authority directly, potentially even questioning his mental competency to rule. The situation had reached a critical point where action could no longer be delayed. Alexander informed Isabella that he had already begun implementing security measures to protect himself and her from potential threats, but he needed her help to ensure that his plans could be carried out successfully. He asked her to serve as his primary liaison with trusted members of the Royal Guard and key political allies who would be essential to managing the transition period that would follow his announcement. Isabella felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized that the next few days would determine not just her own fate, but the future direction of the entire kingdom. The royal drama that had been building beneath the surface was about to explode into the open, and she would be at the center of the storm that would reshape Valdoria forever. As she left the king's chambers that morning, Isabella couldn't help but wonder whether they had already waited too long to act, and whether the forces that Prince William and Lord Thornfield had set in motion were too powerful to stop. The palace that had been her home for 3 years suddenly felt like a battlefield where every corridor could conceal an enemy, and every familiar face might belong to someone whose loyalty had been compromised. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the very foundations of the monarchy. And Isabella knew that the choices she made in the coming days would echo through Valdorian history for generations to come. The following morning brought an unseasonable chill to the palace grounds, as if nature itself sensed the approaching storm that would shake the very foundations of the Valdorian monarchy. Queen Consort Isabella awoke before dawn, her mind immediately returning to the weighty conversation she had shared with King Alexander the previous day. The journals lay secured in her private safe, their revelations burning in her memory like brands of fire that threatened to consume everything she held dear. As she prepared for the day ahead, Isabella's lady-in-waiting, Margaret, approached her with unusual urgency etched across her normally composed features. Margaret had served in the palace for over 15 years and possessed an invaluable network of contacts among the household staff, making her privy to information that rarely reached the upper echelons of the royal hierarchy. Her news this morning would prove to be both crucial and deeply disturbing. Margaret revealed that overnight, several long-time members of the Royal Guard had been quietly reassigned to new posts, with their replacements being handpicked by Captain Harrison Reed. More troubling still, the palace's communication systems had undergone what was officially described as routine maintenance, but which had effectively placed all incoming and outgoing messages under the direct supervision of Lord Thornfield's office. The changes were being implemented with remarkable efficiency, suggesting that they had been planned well in advance. The implications were immediately clear to Isabella. Prince William and his allies were moving to consolidate their control over the palace's security and communications infrastructure, positioning themselves to monitor and potentially intercept any attempts by King Alexander to communicate with outside allies or implement his planned reforms. The timing was particularly concerning, as it coincided with the arrival of additional international dignitaries for the upcoming royal anniversary celebration, creating a complex web of diplomatic obligations that would make any dramatic moves even more challenging to execute. Isabella realized that she needed to act quickly to establish secure lines of communication with Alexander's trusted allies before Prince William's network could completely isolate the king. She arranged to meet with Lady Catherine Northworth at the Royal Gardens, a location where they could speak freely without fear of electronic surveillance. Their conversation would reveal the full scope of the crisis that was rapidly unfolding within the palace walls. Catherine Northworth had spent the night conducting her own investigation into the personnel changes that had occurred throughout the palace. Her findings painted a disturbing picture of a coordinated effort to place Prince William's supporters in key positions throughout the royal household. The new appointments included not just security personnel, but also communications staff, administrative assistants, and even kitchen workers who would have access to the royal family's private quarters and daily routines. What made the situation even more alarming was Catherine's discovery that several of the newly appointed staff members had connections to foreign interests, particularly businesses and political organizations with ties to neighboring kingdoms that had historically viewed Valdoria with suspicion or outright hostility. The pattern suggested that Prince William's plans might extend beyond simply securing his position as heir apparent, potentially involving external actors who would benefit from instability within the Valdorian monarchy. Catherine had also uncovered evidence that Lord Thornfield had been secretly meeting with representatives from the Kingdom of Astoria, the same nation whose diplomats had engaged in those suspicious conversations with Prince William during the recent state dinner. Financial records obtained through her network of contacts indicated that substantial sums of money had been transferred from Astorian sources to accounts controlled by shell companies with connections to Thornfield's business enterprises. The two women realized that they were confronting not just a family dispute over succession, but a potential conspiracy that could involve foreign interference in Valdorian affairs. The implications for national security were staggering, and they knew that King Alexander needed to be informed immediately about these developments. However, they also recognized that the palace's compromised communication systems made direct contact with the king extremely risky. Isabella decided to take a bold and dangerous step. She would attempt to reach King Alexander through a secret passage system that connected various parts of the palace, passages that had been constructed centuries ago for security purposes, but were now known to only a handful of people. Catherine Northworth would serve as a lookout and create a diversion if necessary, while Isabella made her way to the king's private chambers through routes that would bypass the areas now under enhanced surveillance. The journey through the hidden passages proved to be both physically challenging and emotionally harrowing. As Isabella navigated the narrow corridors and steep staircases that wound their way through the palace's ancient architecture, she couldn't help but reflect on the generations of royal family members who had used these same routes during times of crisis.
The walls seemed to whisper with the echoes of past conspiracies, political upheavals, and family betrayals that had shaped Valdorian history.
When she finally reached King Alexander's chambers, Isabella found the king in a state of controlled agitation that suggested he had already become aware of the morning's developments. Alexander revealed that his own intelligence sources had confirmed the personnel changes and had provided additional information about Prince William's activities that painted an even more troubling picture of the situation. The king disclosed that Prince William had been in communication with several prominent members of Parliament, apparently attempting to build support for a motion of no confidence in Alexander's leadership. The prince was reportedly arguing that his father's recent decisions, particularly his marriage to Isabella, and his apparent reluctance to begin transferring certain royal responsibilities to the heir apparent, demonstrated that Alexander was no longer capable of effectively governing the kingdom. More damaging still, Prince William had been spreading rumors about Alexander's mental state, suggesting that the king's grief over Queen Catherine's death had never fully resolved, and that his judgment had become compromised as a result. These allegations were particularly dangerous because they played into existing concerns among some political factions about the stability of the monarchy during a period of significant economic and social change within the kingdom. Alexander's response to these revelations was to accelerate his own timeline for implementing the succession reforms he had been contemplating. He informed Isabella that he had already drafted the necessary legal documents and had secured the support of key constitutional experts who would be required to validate any changes to the line of succession. However, he needed more time to build sufficient political support to ensure that his reforms would be accepted by Parliament and the broader public. The king's plan was to use the royal anniversary celebration as a platform not just for announcing the succession changes, but for presenting evidence of the financial irregularities and potential security threats that had influenced his decision. He believed that by making a comprehensive public case for his actions, he could maintain the legitimacy of the monarchy while addressing the concerns that had led him to question Prince William's fitness for the throne. However, Alexander's strategy required that he maintain control over the palace and its operations until the anniversary celebration could take place. The personnel changes implemented by Prince William's faction represented a direct threat to this plan, as they could potentially prevent the king from accessing the resources and support systems he would need to make his case effectively. Isabella volunteered to serve as the king's primary liaison with the loyal members of the royal guard and palace staff, who had not been compromised by Prince William's reorganization efforts. Her position as queen consort gave her certain privileges and access rights that could prove crucial in maintaining communication with Alexander's allies, even under the enhanced surveillance conditions that now existed within the palace. Their first objective would be to identify and secure the support of the remaining loyal personnel, while simultaneously gathering additional evidence of the conspiracy that was unfolding around them. Alexander provided Isabella with a list of individuals he considered completely trustworthy, along with coded communication methods that could be used to coordinate their activities without alerting Prince William's network to their plans. The task would be extremely dangerous, as any discovery of their activities could trigger an immediate confrontation that might result in Alexander being declared unfit to rule, or even placed under some form of protective custody that would effectively remove him from power. Isabella understood that her own position would become untenable if their efforts were exposed, potentially leading to her banishment from the kingdom or worse. Despite these risks, both Isabella and Alexander recognized that they had reached a point where inaction would be even more dangerous than attempting to fight back against the forces that were working to undermine the legitimate authority of the crown. The upcoming royal anniversary celebration represented their best and possibly last opportunity to regain control of the situation before Prince William's conspiracy could achieve its ultimate objectives. As Isabella prepared to leave the king's chambers and begin the dangerous work of building a counter-network within the palace, Alexander shared one final piece of information that would fundamentally change her understanding of the stakes involved in their struggle. He revealed that among Queen Catherine's personal effects, which had been stored in a secured vault since her death, were documents that suggested her riding accident might not have been accidental after all. The implications of this revelation were staggering. If Queen Catherine had indeed been murdered, it would mean that the conspiracy they were now confronting had been years in the making and had already claimed the life of one member of the royal family. It would also suggest that Prince William might be either a victim of manipulation by more sinister forces or an active participant in a plot that had involved the death of his own mother. Alexander had not yet been able to fully investigate these suspicions, as doing so would require resources and expertise that were now potentially compromised by the personnel changes within the palace. However, He believed that proving or disproving the circumstances of Catherine's death would be crucial to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy they were facing and determining the most appropriate response to the current crisis. Isabella left the king's chambers with her mind reeling from the magnitude of the situation she had agreed to help address. The royal drama that had begun with the discovery of Alexander's private journals had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous than she had initially imagined. As she made her way back through the secret passages to her own quarters, she realized that the choices she made in the coming days would determine not just the future of the monarchy, but potentially the safety and security of everyone she cared about within the palace walls. The royal anniversary celebration was now just 48 hours away, and the ancient halls of Valdoria Palace buzzed with an energy that masked the deadly serious game being played behind the scenes. Queen Consort Isabella had spent the previous day carefully implementing King Alexander's plan to identify and rally the loyal members of the palace staff, a task that proved both more difficult and more revealing than she had anticipated. Using the coded communication methods Alexander had provided, Isabella had managed to establish contact with 12 members of the royal guard who remained unquestionably loyal to the king. Among them was Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez, a decorated military veteran who had served the crown for 25 years and possessed both the tactical expertise and unwavering integrity that would be crucial to their efforts. Vasquez became Isabella's primary coordinator for the security aspects of their counter-operation. The information gathered through this network of loyal staff members painted an increasingly alarming picture of the conspiracy they were confronting. Vasquez reported that the personnel changes implemented by Captain Harrison Reed had been far more extensive than initially apparent, affecting not just visible security positions but also technical staff responsible for electronic surveillance, communications equipment, and even the palace's computer systems. More troubling still, Vasquez had discovered evidence that some of the newly appointed security personnel were carrying specialized communication devices that operated on encrypted channels not used by the standard Royal Guard equipment. This suggested that Prince William's faction had established a parallel command structure within the palace, one that could coordinate activities without the knowledge or oversight of the legitimate security hierarchy. Isabella's investigation also revealed the extent to which Lord Thornfield had consolidated his influence over the palace's administrative functions. Through a combination of personnel appointments and procedural changes, Thornfield had effectively gained control over the flow of information between the royal family and the outside world. Official communications, financial transactions, and even routine correspondence were now routed through systems that allowed him to monitor and potentially intercept any messages that might threaten his plans. The financial irregularities that King Alexander had documented in his journals proved to be even more extensive than the written records had suggested. Catherine Northworth's continued investigation had uncovered evidence of a sophisticated embezzlement scheme that had been diverting funds from various royal accounts for nearly 5 years. The stolen money had been channeled through a network of shell companies and foreign bank accounts, with substantial portions ultimately flowing to the Kingdom of Astoria. What made this discovery particularly damaging was the evidence suggesting that Prince William had been aware of the financial irregularities for at least 2 years, yet had taken no action to report or address them. In fact, several large expenditures from the prince's personal accounts appeared to coincide with major transfers from the embezzled funds, suggesting that he might have been directly benefiting from the theft of royal resources. Catherine Northworth had also made a breakthrough in understanding the circumstances surrounding Queen Catherine's death 10 years earlier. Through careful examination of archived records and discreet inquiries with former palace staff, she had uncovered several inconsistencies in the official investigation of the riding accident. Most significantly, she had discovered that the horse Queen Catherine was riding that day had been switched at the last minute, supposedly due to her regular mount developing a minor injury. The replacement horse had been provided by a stable owned by one of Lord Thornfield's business associates, and records showed that the animal had a history of unpredictable behavior that should have disqualified it from use by members of the royal family. The veterinary reports from the original investigation had noted unusual traces of substances in the horse's system that could have contributed to its erratic behavior, but these findings had been dismissed as inconclusive and never pursued further. Even more disturbing was Catherine Northworth's discovery that several key witnesses to the accident had either left the kingdom permanently or had died under suspicious circumstances in the years following Queen Catherine's death. The pattern suggested a systematic effort to eliminate anyone who might have been able to provide testimony that contradicted the official version of events. Armed with this evidence, Isabella and Catherine Northworth requested another secret meeting with King Alexander to share their findings and finalize their strategy for the anniversary celebration. The meeting would take place in the palace's ancient chapel, a location that held special significance for the royal family. and provided both symbolic appropriateness and practical security for their discussions. When they gathered in the chapel that evening, King Alexander's demeanor reflected the tremendous burden he was carrying as the crisis reached its climax. The evidence presented by Isabella and Catherine confirmed his worst fears about the conspiracy that had been operating within his own household, but it also provided him with the concrete proof he would need to justify the dramatic actions he was planning to take. Alexander revealed that his own investigation had yielded additional information about the international dimensions of the conspiracy. Intelligence sources within the government had confirmed that representatives of the Kingdom of Astoria had been engaging in unauthorized diplomatic activities within Valdoria, including meetings with business leaders and political figures that violated established protocols for foreign relations. The evidence suggested that Astoria was working to destabilize the Valdorian monarchy as part of a broader strategy to expand their influence in the region. By supporting Prince William's claim to the throne while simultaneously compromising his position through involvement in financial crimes and potentially even murder, they could effectively place a puppet ruler on the Valdorian throne, one whose continued power would depend on their ongoing support and protection. King Alexander's response to these revelations was to finalize a plan that would expose the entire conspiracy during the anniversary celebration, while simultaneously implementing the succession reforms that would remove Prince William from the line of inheritance. The plan was bold, risky, and would require precise coordination to succeed, but Alexander believed it represented their only chance to save both the monarchy and the kingdom from foreign manipulation. The anniversary celebration would begin with traditional ceremonies honoring the history and achievements of the Valdorian crown, providing an opportunity for Alexander to demonstrate the continuity and legitimacy of his authority before revealing the evidence of conspiracy and corruption. International dignitaries and domestic political leaders would all be present, ensuring maximum visibility for his announcements and making it difficult for Prince William's faction to suppress or discredit his revelations. Alexander's strategy included several carefully coordinated elements designed to maximize the impact of his revelations while minimizing the opportunities for his opponents to mount an effective response. Sergeant Major Vasquez would lead a team of loyal guards in securing key areas of the palace and arresting Lord Thornfield and Captain Harrison Reed on charges of treason and embezzlement. Simultaneously, evidence of the financial crimes and foreign interference would be presented to the assembled dignitaries and media representatives. Isabella would play a crucial role in the operation by serving as Alexander's primary spokesperson and liaison with the international community. Her position as queen consort, combined with her reputation for integrity and her lack of direct involvement in the historical events being exposed, would lend credibility to the accusations being made against Prince William and his associates. The most delicate aspect of the plan involved the handling of Prince William himself. Alexander had decided that his son would not be arrested immediately, but would instead be given an opportunity to publicly acknowledge his involvement in the conspiracy and cooperate with the investigation. This approach reflected both Alexander's hope that William might have been manipulated rather than being a willing participant, and his understanding that treating the heir apparent too harshly could create additional political complications. However, Alexander had also prepared for the possibility that Prince William would refuse to cooperate or might attempt to flee the kingdom to avoid prosecution. In such cases, warrants for his arrest had already been prepared, and arrangements had been made with international law enforcement agencies to ensure that he could be apprehended and returned to Valdoria to face justice. The preparation for implementing this plan required Isabella to demonstrate skills and courage that she had never known she possessed. Working with Catherine Northworth and Sergeant Major Vasquez, she coordinated the positioning of loyal personnel throughout the palace, ensured that secure communication channels remained operational, and helped to prepare the evidence that would be presented during the anniversary celebration. One of the most challenging aspects of the preparation involved maintaining the pretense of normalcy while these activities were taking place. Isabella had to continue performing her regular duties as queen consort, attending meetings and social functions as if nothing unusual was occurring, all while knowing that she was being watched by Prince William's network of supporters, who were looking for any sign that their plans had been discovered. The psychological pressure of maintaining this deception while coordinating a counter-conspiracy was enormous, but Isabella drew strength from her conviction that she was fighting to preserve both the integrity of the monarchy and the security of the kingdom. The evidence they had uncovered left no doubt that Prince William's faction represented a genuine threat to Valdoria's independence and democratic traditions, making their efforts not just a family dispute, but a matter of national security. As the anniversary celebration approached, tensions within the palace reached a breaking point. Prince William's behavior became increasingly erratic, suggesting that he might be aware that his plans were in jeopardy. Lord Thornfield appeared to be accelerating his own timeline, implementing additional security measures that further restricted access to various areas of the palace and limited communication between different departments. The final 24 hours before the anniversary celebration would test every aspect of the plan that Alexander, Isabella, and their allies had developed. Success would require not just courage and coordination, but also a measure of luck that would allow them to outmaneuver opponents who had been planning their own moves for years. The fate of the Valdorian crown, and perhaps the kingdom itself, would be determined by the events of the following day. The dawn of the royal anniversary celebration broke clear and bright over Valdoria Palace, but the beauty of the morning could not mask the electric tension that crackled through every corridor and chamber of the ancient fortress. Queen Consort Isabella stood once again at the windows of the East Wing, but this time her view encompassed not just the palace grounds, but the hundreds of international dignitaries, media representatives, and distinguished guests who had gathered to witness what they believed would be a routine celebration of Valdorian royal tradition. What they would actually witness would be one of the most dramatic confrontations in the kingdom's thousand-year history, a revelation that would shake the foundations of the monarchy and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and extended across international borders. For Isabella, the day represented the culmination of weeks of dangerous investigation and careful planning, but also the beginning of an uncertain future for herself and everyone she had come to care about within the palace walls. The celebration began according to protocol, with traditional ceremonies that honored the history and achievements of the Valdorian crown. King Alexander appeared calm and composed as he performed his ceremonial duties, greeting international dignitaries and delivering the customary address that marked the formal opening of the anniversary festivities. To observers, he seemed every inch the confident monarch, showing no sign of the momentous revelations he was preparing to unveil. Behind the scenes, however, the final preparations for the counter-conspiracy were reaching their climax. Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez had positioned her loyal guards at strategic locations throughout the palace, while maintaining the appearance of routine security operations. Catherine Northworth had ensured that all evidence was properly organized and ready for presentation, with backup copies secured in multiple locations to prevent any attempted suppression or destruction. Isabella herself had spent the early morning hours in final coordination meetings with key allies, including several members of Parliament, who had been quietly briefed on the situation and had agreed to support King Alexander's actions. The political dimension of the crisis required careful handling, as the success of their efforts would ultimately depend on maintaining the legitimacy of the monarchy while exposing the corruption that threatened to destroy it from within. The first sign that something extraordinary was about to occur came during the traditional presentation of honors, when King Alexander deviated from the prepared ceremony to announce that he had urgent matters of national importance to address. The assembled guests, who had been expecting a routine celebration, suddenly found themselves witnesses to history as Alexander began to reveal the evidence that had been gathered over the previous weeks. Alexander's presentation was masterful in its combination of dignified restraint and devastating revelation. He began by acknowledging the gravity of the accusations he was about to make, emphasizing his commitment to the truth and his responsibility to protect the kingdom from threats both internal and external. He then methodically presented the evidence of financial irregularities, foreign interference and conspiracy that had been uncovered through the investigation. The reaction from the assembled crowd was immediate and intense. International dignitaries exchanged shocked glances as Alexander detailed the extent of Asturian involvement in the conspiracy, while domestic political leaders struggled to process the implications of the revelations for Valdoria's governance and security. The media representatives present recognized immediately that they were witnessing a story of international significance, one that would dominate headlines for months to come. Prince William's response to his father's accusations was perhaps the most dramatic moment of the entire confrontation. Rather than attempting to deny the charges or cooperate with the investigation as Alexander had hoped, the prince chose to double down on his conspiracy, publicly challenging his father's authority and calling for his removal from the throne on grounds of mental incompetence. This response triggered the final phase of the plan that Alexander and Isabella had prepared. Sergeant Major Vasquez and her loyal guards moved quickly to secure key areas of the palace, while simultaneously arresting Lord Thornfield and Captain Harrison Reed on charges of treason, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The precision and professionalism of these operations demonstrated the careful planning that had gone into the counter-conspiracy, but also revealed the extent to which the palace had been infiltrated by disloyal elements. The arrest of Thornfield proved particularly significant, as he immediately attempted to destroy evidence and communicate with external contacts in a desperate effort to salvage his conspiracy. However, The communication channels he had been relying on had been quietly compromised by Alexander's loyal intelligence officers, allowing them to intercept and record his attempts to coordinate with Asturian agents and other co-conspirators. Prince William's attempt to rally support from the guards he believed were loyal to him provided the most shocking revelation of the entire crisis. When he called upon Captain Reed's replacement guards to arrest King Alexander, several of them stepped forward as if to comply, only to reveal that they had been working as double agents, gathering intelligence on the conspiracy while maintaining the appearance of loyalty to William's cause. The prince's realization that he had been systematically outmaneuvered by his father and stepmother triggered a breakdown that was both personally tragic and politically devastating. His public accusations against Alexander became increasingly erratic and desperate, ultimately providing even more evidence of his unfitness for the throne, while simultaneously destroying any remaining sympathy he might have retained among potential supporters. As the immediate crisis unfolded, Isabella found herself thrust into a role she had never anticipated, serving as the primary liaison between the royal family and the international community during one of the most turbulent moments in Valdorian history. Her performance in this capacity would prove crucial to maintaining international confidence in the monarchy's stability and legitimacy during the transition period that would follow Prince William's removal from the line of succession. The evidence presented during the anniversary celebration included not just financial records and communications intercepts, but also the results of the investigation into Queen Catherine's death 10 years earlier. The revelation that the beloved former queen had likely been murdered as part of the same conspiracy that had now been exposed added an emotional dimension to the crisis that resonated powerfully with the Valdorian public and international observers. The forensic evidence that Catherine Northworth had uncovered, combined with testimony from previously intimidated witnesses who had been brought forward under protective custody, painted a clear picture of a long-term conspiracy designed to gradually weaken the monarchy and position Prince William as a puppet ruler dependent on foreign support. The systematic nature of the plot and its willingness to resort to murder when necessary demonstrated the serious threat that had been posed to Valdorian independence and democratic institutions. King Alexander's announcement of the succession reforms that would remove Prince William from the line of inheritance was met with a mixture of shock, relief, and uncertainty from the various constituencies present at the celebration. International observers recognized the constitutional complexity of such changes, but also acknowledged the compelling evidence that had been presented to justify them. Domestic political leaders, many of whom had been unaware of the conspiracy's existence, found themselves grappling with the implications for their own positions and allegiances. The immediate aftermath of the revelation saw a flurry of diplomatic activity as foreign governments sought to distance themselves from the conspiracy while simultaneously gathering intelligence about its full scope and implications. The Kingdom of Asturia's government initially denied any knowledge of their agents' activities, but the evidence presented was too comprehensive and well documented to be dismissed as fabrication or misunderstanding. For Isabella, the success of the counter-conspiracy represented both a personal victory and the beginning of new challenges that would define her role as Queen Consort for years to come. Her demonstrated courage and competence during the crisis had earned her respect from previously skeptical political figures and international observers, but she also recognized that the monarchy would need to rebuild trust and credibility in the wake of the scandal. The investigation that followed the anniversary celebration revelations would ultimately uncover an even broader network of corruption and foreign interference than had initially been suspected. Additional arrests were made in the weeks following Prince William's public disgrace, including several prominent business leaders and political figures who had been compromised by Asturian agents or had participated in the embezzlement schemes for personal gain. Prince William himself, faced with overwhelming evidence of his involvement in conspiracy and potentially murder, ultimately chose exile over prosecution. His departure from Valdoria marked the end of a chapter in the kingdom's history, but also the beginning of a period of constitutional and political reform designed to prevent similar threats from emerging in the future. The changes implemented in the wake of the crisis included not just the succession reforms that removed William from the line of inheritance, but also enhanced security protocols, improved financial oversight, and strengthened counterintelligence capabilities designed to detect and neutralize foreign interference in Valdorian affairs. These reforms would serve as a model for other kingdoms facing similar threats to their sovereignty and democratic institutions. For King Alexander, the successful resolution of the crisis represented both vindication of his concerns about his son's fitness for leadership and validation of his decision to trust Isabella with crucial responsibilities during the kingdom's most dangerous hour. The partnership between the king and queen consort that had emerged during the conspiracy would continue to guide Valdoria through the challenging process of recovery and reform that lay ahead. Isabella's transformation from a relatively inexperienced queen consort to a central figure in preserving Valdorian independence and constitutional governance represented one of the most remarkable aspects of the entire crisis. Her willingness to risk everything to protect the integrity of the monarchy, combined with her demonstrated skills in investigation, diplomacy, and crisis management, established her as a formidable political figure in her own right. The royal anniversary celebration that had been intended as a routine ceremonial occasion had instead become a defining moment in Valdorian history, one that would be remembered for generations as the day when a determined king and queen consort saved their kingdom from foreign domination and internal corruption. The ancient halls of Valdoria Palace had witnessed many dramatic events over the centuries, but few could match the combination of personal betrayal, international intrigue, and ultimate triumph that characterized this remarkable confrontation. As the immediate crisis passed and the work of rebuilding began, Isabella reflected on the journey that had brought her from discovering King Alexander's hidden journals to standing as one of the most respected figures in the kingdom. The path had been dangerous and uncertain, but it had also revealed strengths and capabilities she had never known she possessed. The future would bring new challenges, but she faced them with confidence born of experience and the knowledge that the truth, courageously pursued and skillfully revealed, remained the strongest weapon against those who would corrupt or destroy the institutions of democratic governance.